At Wheelabrator, ensuring the health and safety of all individuals and the protection of the environment are values we will not compromise. Nothing we do will be placed at a higher level of importance. Please help us achieve our goal of 0 incidents each day. Contractors working at Wheelabrator facilities must understand that poor environmental, health, and safety work practices will not be tolerated. EHS performance is a factor used when selecting contractors for future work. Wheelabrator requires its contractors to properly supervise its employees, agents, and subcontractors to ensure strict compliance with applicable federal, state, and local regulations and Wheelabrator safety and environmental rules at all times. Violators may be removed from a facility. Contractors must ensure that Wheelabrator's safety and environmental requirements are clearly communicated to all contractors and subcontractors' employees for the duration of the work. Contractors are responsible for designating one person per shift to provide safety and environmental supervision for their own employees, agents, and subcontractors, and that designated person or their designee must remain on site while the contractor is working. If Wheelabrator observes a safety hazard or environmental incident caused by a contractor which poses an imminent danger to people or the environment, Wheelabrator will stop the work and require the contractor's supervisor to take immediate corrective action to eliminate the hazard. If a contractor creates a hazard or environmental incident that does not pose an imminent danger, it will be reported to the contractor's supervisor and Wheelabrator facility management. Contractors must notify Wheelabrator of any unanticipated hazardous conditions found during the contractor's work that was not previously identified. The contractor must not remove or disturb a hazardous condition until Wheelabrator has provided the contractor with written instructions on how to handle it. Contractors or contractors' employees who fail to perform work in compliance with the contract requirements or demonstrates an indifferent attitude towards safety or the environment may be removed from the site or the contract may be terminated. At the beginning of each working shift, the contractor must provide Wheelabrator with a complete list of contractor employees who are on site during that shift. The list must be updated whenever the contractor's employees leave the Wheelabrator site or if additional contractor employees arrive on site. Wheelabrator reserves the right to require each contractor employee to register daily entry and exit from the facility property using manual or electronic systems provided by Wheelabrator. Wheelabrator reserves the right to require each contractor employee to wear an identification badge provided by the facility. All contractors must be covered by a valid Wheelabrator service agreement and have valid licenses and certificates for the work being performed. On an annual basis, all employees or representatives of the contractor providing services on site must participate in an EHS orientation and RCRA awareness training session, and an on-site task-specific EHS pre-job briefing conducted by Wheelabrator. Hard hat stickers will be given to all attendees to verify participation. Attendance will be verified by signing an attendance form for all on-site sessions or by registering online for the general orientation. Communication to the control room must be available at all times as prescribed by the facility. The contractor's designated person must be able to converse in the language the employees can understand and must be able to communicate with Wheelabrator plant personnel. Each contractor must have a first aid kit available. Bloodborne pathogen training and related equipment is the responsibility of the contractor. Contractors must familiarize themselves with the facility and know where the closest emergency eye wash station and shower are located and how to operate them before starting a job assignment. Contractors are required to report all work-related injuries or illnesses that require an evaluation or treatment by a medical provider or hospital and serious near misses immediately to the control room. Contact the control room for all emergencies. When emergency services are required, the call will be made through the control room. In general, contractors should not dial 911 from a cellular phone. Contractors must complete an incident investigation report within 24 hours of an incident. An incident is defined as a work-related injury or illness requiring an evaluation or treatment by a medical provider or hospital, or any near miss that could have resulted in similar medical treatment or evaluation. The investigation must contain, at a minimum, the information required on the federal or state OSHA record-keeping form and include causal factors, root causes, corrective actions, and alternative solutions for preventing a reoccurrence of the event. The completed report is given to the control room. All contractors or subcontractors working at Wheelabrator facilities must have a fully implemented drug and alcohol program. The program must include, but not be limited to, certain requirements. A contractor's employee must not show up for work at the facility while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The program must include random drug and alcohol testing, and testing when there is reasonable suspicion. The program must also prohibit anyone testing positive from working at Wheelabrator facilities. There must also be a way for the contractor to be notified when an employee is taking prescription medications that could influence work performance. And the program must prohibit the possession of illegal drugs and/or alcohol on company property, and possession is grounds for immediate and permanent removal from the site. Wheelabrator is not responsible for the administration of the contractor's program. Unsafe acts, horseplay, intoxicants, or firearms are not allowed on site. Make sure to follow instructions in all posted areas and observe all warning signs. Contractors must provide pre-job safety briefings to their employees before starting each new job. At a minimum, topics should include the hazards associated with the job, work procedures involved, special precautions, energy source controls, personal protective equipment requirements, the location of eye wash stations, emergency showers, fire extinguishers, plant phones, and/or the public address system, the closest point of egress from the work area, and how to evacuate the facility based on where they are working and the designated muster point following the evacuation. The power plant ash contains varying concentrations of silica, inorganic arsenic, and heavy metals such as lead and cadmium. In addition, certain types of work may produce respirable silica or hexavalent chromium exposures. Contractor employees are required to thoroughly wash their hands and face before eating or drinking and before leaving the facility. Clothing and boots containing ash must be removed or cleaned with a vacuum fitted with a high-efficiency particulate air or HEPA filter before leaving the facility. Contractors may not enter lunchrooms or administrative areas with dirty or dusty clothing or equipment. Park only in areas designated by Wheelabrator. Never block building exits, emergency routes, fire lanes, or emergency or fire equipment. All vehicles operated on Wheelabrator property must obey posted speed limits and always provide pedestrians with the right-of-way. Adjust speed in response to reduced visibility or slippery conditions. Some areas of the facility may be marked with barrier or warning tape. Yellow tape indicates that contractors can enter the area with caution. Red tape means do not enter. All red tape requires a barrier tape permit issued by Wheelabrator. Smoking or chewing tobacco is only permitted in designated areas. Eating or drinking is not permitted at any time within the facility except in designated areas. Contractors must provide all required PPE to their employees, agents, and subcontractors, and must provide full instructions and training on the proper use of the PPE before any work starts. They are required to properly supervise all employees, agents, and subcontractors to ensure they are in compliance with protective equipment and clothing. All workers must follow the instructions on posted signs. All PPE must be worn in accordance with manufacturer instructions. For example, hard hats must face forward. Welding helmets are required to be fitted with hard hats. Unless otherwise designated, hard hats are required in all areas of the facility. Wheelabrator reserves the right to specify the color of the hard hats that contractors are required to wear. Safety glasses with permanent side shields are required at all times on site except in designated areas. Mirrored safety glass lenses or shades of any color greater than 10% are not permitted while working indoors. Goggles are required when working or around others working in areas containing airborne ash, dry chemical, or dust hazards. For example, when work is done during windy conditions, below ash-laden equipment, and during ash or dry chemical handling, such as lime. Splash goggles and a full face shield are required where there are actual or potential liquid chemical splash hazards, or where pressurized air or liquid hazards exist. Some examples include pumping or pouring chemicals, SDA lance changeout, using an air lance, tightening a fitting on a pressurized hydraulic system, or using a power washer. Face shields are required for all grinding and chemical transfer operations. Shaded eye protection is required while cutting, burning, and welding. Work boots with safety toes made of steel or fiberglass are required. Sneakers are not permitted. Appropriate gloves must be worn when needed to protect your hands from chemicals, abrasions, heat, needle sticks, sharp objects, or other hazards. Use properly tested and rated electrical gloves and equipment for energized electrical work. Hearing protection is required in all process areas of the facility and wherever posted. Similarly, double hearing protection is required when working in areas where double hearing protection signs are posted. Hot work activities require leathers or other appropriate protection. If using disposable suits or coveralls, only those that are flame resistant are allowed during hot work activities. Wheelabrator employees are required to wear respiratory protection while performing specific tasks or while working in specific environmental conditions. Respiratory protection selection is based on air sampling data collected during these tasks and in various conditions. Respiratory protection must be used in all posted areas. Under state and federal OSHA standards, contractors using respiratory protection are required to have a respiratory protection program. They need to assess their employees' exposure to air contaminants and select the appropriate respiratory protection. They are welcome to review Wheelabrator's industrial hygiene air sampling data to assist in selecting the appropriate respiratory protection, but the data may not be relevant to the tasks the contractor will be performing. Contractors wanting to conduct air sampling on Wheelabrator sites must coordinate these activities with the facility before they begin. A contractor air sampling plan will be required and approved by a Wheelabrator EHS manager before any air sampling is performed. An example of an approved air sampling plan and associated field observation sheets can be provided upon request. In accordance with state and federal OSHA standards, tight-fitting respirators must not be worn if any facial hair interferes with the facepiece sealing surface or could impact the exhalation valve operation. Do not wear loose-fitting clothing or jewelry around rotating tools and machinery. Keep hair secured out of the way if it could become entangled in tools and machinery or obscure your vision. Do not wear electrically conductive articles like jewelry, chains, watches, earrings, and key rings around exposed energized lines and equipment. Full-length pants extending below the ankle are required. Long-sleeve shirts must be worn in those areas of the facility where contractors' employees are potentially exposed to thermal or chemical burns and cuts, scrapes, and abrasion hazards. Tank tops are not permitted at any time. All clothing, including outer garments such as pants and shirts and undergarments, must meet state and federal OSHA standards when working on or near exposed energized parts. Workers shall be protected from fall hazards, including unprotected sides and edges, which are 4 feet or more above a lower level, and floor holes and wall openings through which persons may fall. Fall protection is provided by the use of guardrail systems, covers, safety net systems, a personal fall arrest or restraint system consisting of a full body harness and lanyard with locking snap hooks attached to a secure and approved anchor point, or warning line systems as determined by a qualified person. A personal fall arrest system must be rated for arc and shock protection for tasks that are done on or near normally energized conductors, parts, or wires. Safety gates on all work platforms must be closed when the platform is occupied. Contractors must pre-plan to provide prompt rescue of a worker in the event of a fall. Excavation fall hazards must be eliminated by using an appropriate fall protection method or by using a fence or barricade which restricts access to the excavation area. Housekeeping is a continuous effort. Contractors are required to keep work areas clean and orderly. Keep all working surfaces free of debris, slippery or spilled materials, and trip hazards such as cords, hoses, and lines. Keep exits, stairways, and corridors clear of obstructions at all times. Keep emergency and fire equipment, eye wash stations, and safety showers clear at all times. Do not store materials in a manner that restricts access, blocks emergency or fire equipment, or obstructs views of roadways or walkways. Do not stack materials too high. Acceptable height is based on the stability of the materials being stacked. Materials must be able to be self-supported or by using vertical, horizontal, and diagonal braces. All materials stored in elevated areas must be securely fastened to prevent falling. Compressed gas cylinders, for example, oxygen and acetylene tanks, must be used on carts or properly secured. Portable ladders need to have non-conductive side rails if they are used where the employee or the ladder could contact exposed energized parts. Portable metal ladders and other portable conductive ladders may not be used near exposed energized lines or equipment. Portable extension ladders must be extended 3 feet above the point of support and either tied off or held securely by another employee. Portable A-frame stepladders must be fully opened before using them. Do not climb stepladders that are leaned against walls, tanks, or other vertical surfaces. Do not use extension ladders that have been separated, job-built ladders, or makeshift ladders such as pallets. Damaged or modified ladders are not permitted on site. When you climb a ladder, face the ladder at all times and maintain 3 points of contact. All scaffolding must comply with state and federal OSHA standards. Do not make changes to scaffolding unless they are coordinated through the designated scaffolding competent person. All scaffolds over 6 feet must have a guardrail system. The system should have a top rail that is between 38 and 45 inches high, a mid-rail, and a 4-inch high toe board. Overhead protection is required beneath ongoing work or in areas where objects may fall onto the scaffold. screened sides are required above walkways. A designated competent person must inspect erected scaffolding each shift. Contractors must report all deficiency with the scaffolding to the control room. If the designated competent person determines that the scaffolding is safe to use, then inspection tags must be placed at all scaffolding entrances to indicate safe to use or similar wording. Contractor employees, agents, and subcontractors must not use the scaffolding unless the inspection tag is visible. Similarly, incomplete or defective scaffolds must be identified through the use of appropriate tags. There are several restricted areas in Wheelabrator facilities that contractors are not permitted to enter unless authorized by a Wheelabrator employee. Entry into the restricted areas must follow the plant-specific policy. The restricted areas include the tipping floor, fuel yards, and loading and unloading areas for ash and metal recovery. Contractors are also not permitted in warehouse areas unless accompanied by a Wheelabrator employee or other arrangements are made with site management. Do not open, move, or remove nuclear level gauge devices or nuclear density meters. These devices are labeled specifying them as a radioactive hazard. Metals recovery and other electrical systems generate magnetic fields that could affect pacemakers or similar devices. Contact Wheelabrator supervision with any concerns or questions. Never ride conveyors. Crossover conveyors only at crosswalks or when the conveyor is de-energized and locked out. Do not walk on conveyor covers. Know the locations of emergency pull cords. The pull cords are used to stop a conveyor in case of an emergency. Do not use the emergency pull cord for situations other than emergencies or in place of lockout procedures, for example, to work on the conveyor. Do not directly contact moving conveyors with any part of your body, and do not clean the pulleys or rollers when the belt is moving. Implement the lockout procedure before working on the conveyor. Do not remove any machine guards while the equipment is in service or without prior Wheelabrator approval. All chemical unloading must comply with Wheelabrator site-specific chemical unloading procedures, which includes the PPE that is required. In addition, the closest emergency eye wash and shower stations to the unloading area must be checked to verify that they are operating correctly. Contact the Wheelabrator control room before unloading any delivery. Contractors must have a safety data sheet for all chemicals they bring on site. All safety data sheets must be available for Wheelabrator review on site. Follow the facility chemical storage and disposal requirements and coordinate with the facility. Information such as the quantity, location to drains, and material compatibility will be addressed. If there's any doubt, ask a Wheelabrator supervisor for clarification. Containers, lines, and tanks are labeled at the facility. If you have a question, ask the control room. SDSs for all hazardous materials used on the site by Wheelabrator are available through Wheelabrator's internal document control system, OBOX. If you have a question about a hazardous material used at the site, contact the control room. Proper lockout/tagout authorization from the control room is required for all jobs with hazardous energy sources. Before starting a task on or near normally energized conductors, parts, or wires, the contractor is required to participate in zero-energy verification with a Wheelabrator lockout authorized person and/or qualified electrical person as described in the energy control procedure for the equipment. At a minimum, a contractor's supervisor must use an individually identified lock on the Wheelabrator lockbox to identify it as a contractor's lock for each work crew. Contractor employees must also have some means of controlling access to the key of that lock following the contractor's lotto procedure. When the work is completed, replace all of the machine guards, reset the safety interlocks, and notify the control room. Permit-required confined spaces exist at the facility and have been labeled as such. Do not work in an area that has been labeled as a PRCS or in an area that you believe is a PRCS without first notifying the control room and obtaining proper authorization through a Wheelabrator-issued PRCS permit. Either a PRCS entry permit and attendant or a posted safe entry reclassification notice must be in place before entry is allowed into any confined space. A PRCS that has been posted as a reclassified non-permit required space does not require authorization to enter. Even though Wheelabrator evaluates PRCSs for its employees, contractors must have their own confined space program in place, including attendants, appropriate retrieval devices, and a means for rescue, unless specific arrangements have been made with the facility. In all cases, entry and rescue procedures must be coordinated with Wheelabrator. PRCS entry operations must be coordinated when both WTI and contractor employees will be working simultaneously in a PRCS. This is to ensure that there is no doubt by any entrant, attendant, or the entry supervisor about who the controlling employer is and whose entry procedures are being followed, including air testing, physical hazard inspections, assigned attendants and rescue arrangements, and that no work is performed at the same time that could create a hazard to entrants. Unless other arrangements are made, both WTI and the contractor must conduct air monitoring and physical condition inspections at the frequency specified on the PRCS entry permit or safe entry certification form to verify that conditions remain safe when working simultaneously in a PRCS. When the PRCS entry has been completed, contractors are required to complete a contractor debriefing. Contractors must establish and enforce precautions to prevent heat and cold-related illness and injury to their employees. All tools and equipment must be in good condition with guards and other safety devices in place and inspected before use. Do not use defective tools or equipment. Contractors are not allowed to use Wheelabrator tools or equipment unless and until a contractor waiver and release agreement for equipment has been executed by the contractor and approved by Wheelabrator. Do not use compressed air for cleaning clothing or in ash areas. Compressed air used to clean parts or equipment in non-ash areas must use safety nozzles to ensure that air pressure will remain below 30 psi in the event the tip of the air nozzle is blocked. Never open any doors or covers without authorization, including boilers, ductwork, ash systems, bins, hoppers, bunkers, silos, and tanks. Always assume all ash is hot. Make sure to follow some basic rules when using a jack. Inspect the jack before using it. Do not use a jack that is leaking fluid. And verify that the jack is properly rated for the weight of the load and its placement is stable before lifting the load. Electric power washers must be GFCI protected. Gasoline, diesel, and propane-powered engines generate exhaust emissions, so they are not to be used inside building structures unless arrangements for the safe evacuation of exhaust emissions are made and the use is authorized by Wheelabrator. Only qualified electrical persons knowledgeable in the construction and operation of electric power generation and transmission equipment and the associated hazards may work on exposed energized lines or equipment operating at 50 volts or more. Keep areas in front of electrical panels clear for at least 36 inches. Do not leave energized conductors exposed. All electrical distribution panels, breakers, disconnects, switches, and junction box doors and covers must be kept closed unless work requiring the doors or covers to be open is in progress. Use only 3-wire industrial extension cords rated for the work environment conditions. All extension cords must be in good condition and inspected before use. Spliced extension cords are not permitted. Use ground fault circuit interrupters when using portable power tools or equipment or extension cords. Avoid placing extension cords or welding leads in contact with wet areas and avoid creating trip hazards in doorways and travel areas. Do not use wire to support extension cords or welding leads. High voltage and energized line work must be coordinated with the control room and local power utility. Contractors are not permitted to use any Wheelabrator mobile equipment or vehicles unless a contractor waiver and release agreement for the equipment has been completed and approved by Wheelabrator. If contractors' employees are authorized to use Wheelabrator equipment, the contractor is responsible for training employees to properly operate the equipment and ensuring they are familiar with all operating and safety procedures associated with the equipment. All equipment must be operated at a safe speed and as designated by the facility. Do not expose workers to pinch point locations. People are not permitted to ride on the outside of vehicles. No mobile equipment is permitted on the site without a restraining device. Seat belts must be used at all times while operating equipment. The reverse alarms must work on all equipment. When planning any excavation or scraping, coordinate with Wheelabrator Site Management and call 811, the national call before you dig phone number, in advance of the scheduled dig, to allow time for possible site surveys and markings. Follow all state and local requirements. All excavations must be covered or barricaded to restrict access. Excavated materials must be placed or stored at least 2 feet from the excavation and be safely sloped. For excavations or trenches over 5 feet deep, a protective system such as sloping, shoring, shielding, or benching is required. Sloping or benching for excavations greater than 20 feet deep must be designed by a registered professional engineer. When excavations are over 4 feet deep, test for atmospheric hazards where oxygen deficiency or a hazardous atmosphere exists or could reasonably be expected to exist, such as in excavations in landfill areas or excavations in areas where hazardous substances are stored nearby. Good rigging practices must always be used. For example, unstable loads are not permitted. Clear communication between the signal person and the operator must be maintained. If visual contact cannot be maintained, then continuous radio communications is required. If continuous communication cannot be maintained, stop operations until the communication is reestablished. Only designated crane operators, signal persons, and spotters who have documented OSHA-required training, certifications, and qualifications are allowed to operate, direct movement, and give signals for cranes involved in construction activities. Hand signals to crane operators must be those prescribed by ANSI for the type of crane in use. An illustration of the signals used by the contractor must be available for on-site Wheelabrator review. When 2 or more hoisting machines are lifting the same load, only one designated signal person will direct the movements. The operator must acknowledge an emergency stop signal from anyone and will stop the lift if a signal is not understood. Crane work zones must be designated. Encroachment prevention measures must be implemented where power lines are within designated work zones. Walking under loads and lifting materials over people is not permitted. People are not allowed to work under the bullnose in the boiler during overhead lifts. Never put yourself in pinch point positions, such as between moving and stationary objects, particularly when hoisting materials or working around mobile equipment. Tag lines must be used to control large loads. Only slings and chains that have been inspected and are free from defects can be used. All hoist and rigging, lifting chains, and slings must have visible load rating tags. Never attach rigging or any lifting device to a stairway or platform railing, such as handrails, guardrails, for lifting or supporting a load. Do not allow the load to exceed the rated capacity of any individual component. Do not expose nylon slings to sharp edges or hot materials. All hoisting equipment, including chain falls and come-alongs, must have a functional safety latch on the upper and lower hooks. Contractors are not permitted to use wheelabrator hoisting or rigging equipment unless and until a contractor waiver and release agreement for the equipment has been completed by the contractor and approved by Wheelabrator. A hot work permit is required for all jobs involving welding, cutting, heating, grinding, open flames, high temperatures, or other activities that generate sparks, except for those jobs occurring in areas that have been designated by the facility as non-permit areas. A hot work permit must be available on the job. Obtain hot work permits from the control room. When the work is completed, return the permit to the control room. Do not use torch sets unless combination reverse flow check valves, flashback arresters are installed on both fuel gas and oxygen lines at the torch and regulators. Place all combustibles beyond a 35-foot radius from the hot work. If that is not possible, the combustibles need to be protected with metal or flame-proof covers. Do not allow solvents or other flammable material in areas where hot work is being performed. Grate surfaces or openings which could allow cutting and welding sparks or spatter to drop onto lower levels must be covered with fire-resistant material. If that is not feasible, mark the area below with red tape and use a fire watch. Persons performing fire watch duties must know and understand the communication method used to report a fire, must not perform other tasks that will interfere with the primary duty to monitor fires. When necessary, warn others of hot work activities and prevent unauthorized entry. Have fire extinguishing equipment capable of extinguishing a hot work generated incipient fire and make sure it is available within 10 seconds of unobstructed travel time from the hot work, and remain at the hot work area for at least 1 hour after work is complete unless specified by the hot work permit. Cylinders must be used upright and secure at all times. A cylinder sling or cradle is required for hoisting. If the torch set will remain idle for periods greater than 24 hours, remove the regulators, cap the cylinders, and return them to storage, unless the cylinder carts are equipped with a 5-foot-high separating plate specifically engineered to meet a half-hour fire resistance rating and prevent the spread of a fire. If spare oxygen and acetylene cylinders will not be used within a 24-hour period, they need to be stored separately at least 20 feet apart or separated by a non-combustible barrier at least 5 feet high, having an engineered fire resistance rating of at least 30 minutes. All stored cylinders are secured with their caps on. Smoking is permitted only in designated areas. In the event of an emergency, medical or otherwise, the contractor is to contact the control room using the plant phone or paging system. In general, contractors should not call 911 using a personal cell phone. Know your escape route in case you need to evacuate the facility in an emergency. An evacuation alarm is used for all emergencies requiring evacuation. When the alarm sounds, leave the facility immediately. Do not use the elevator. Use stairwells and follow the exit signs. The primary assembly point for any evacuation is at the administrative building parking lot, unless otherwise instructed. Each facility also has a secondary evacuation assembly point. When the primary assembly point cannot be used, the facility will instruct the contractor where to meet. Leaks or spills to the ground are not permitted. If you see a leak or spill of any quantity, immediately notify the control room. Never release chemicals, oils, fuels, solvents, etc. into plant drains, sinks, or sewers. If contractors anticipate placing storage tanks in the facility, the locations of the storage tanks should be discussed with Wheelabrator staff during the initial EHS orientation. Tanks must only be placed in locations that have been specifically approved by Wheelabrator management. All temporary fuel and chemical storage tanks must have a means of secondary containment. Work involving large portable water tanks, for example, Baker or Adler tanks, must follow specific Wheelabrator rules. Rules will be provided by WTI Site Management during EHS orientation if large portable water tanks will be used. Contractors are not allowed to generate hazardous waste unless it's specified in the contractor's service agreement with Wheelabrator and detailed in Attachment A, Scope of Services. If a contractor anticipates that the work will generate hazardous waste on site, then the Wheelabrator Site Management needs to be notified during the EHS orientation. Contractors also need to notify site management during the same shift that the waste is generated. For multi-day jobs where hazardous waste generation is expected over an extended period, only an initial notification is required. Waste materials are placed in drums or containers provided or approved by Wheelabrator and then moved to an approved on-site storage location as specified by plant management. Do not store waste at a Wheelabrator facility without notifying plant management of its type, quantity, and location. All hazardous waste containers must be kept closed except when waste is actively added or removed from the container. Do not remove waste materials from the Wheelabrator facility. Do not dispose waste generated on site onto the tipping floor unless facility management has given its approval. When performing work that uses liquid chemicals or oil within 20 feet of drains, install temporary drain covers before beginning. Notify plant management before undertaking any work on equipment that might release ash to the environment. This includes any outdoor work where ash could be released as fugitive dust or released to the ground, including release as a wastewater or a component of wash water. The contractor's scope of services will specify the controls necessary to prevent ash releases to the environment. For outdoor work, a temporary enclosure must be constructed to prevent potential releases. Immediately notify Wheelabrator management if in the course of your work outside the building structures, ash is released to the ground or as visible dust emissions. Used grates, boiler tubes, conveyor parts, and other used equipment partially coated with ash must be stored indoors, or if stored outdoors, must be placed on pallets and covered or contained to prevent ash dispersion and stormwater contact. Ash containers must be covered and be leak-tight. Do not dispose ash or otherwise remove ash from the plant site. Also make sure to clean ash off of tools and equipment inside the plant structure before leaving the property. Hazardous waste spill response and cleanup must be handled by individuals who have received training in accordance with state and federal hazardous waste regulations. Everyone working at Wheelabrator facilities must understand that safety is paramount to the success of all work. If you have any questions about any information covered in this training or specific issues that develop during your work, please contact the Wheelabrator management at the facility.